couple of things, just brief reminders to kind of recenter us as we get into Commandments 3 and 4. One, progressive Christianity, as we saw from Schleiermacher and all these people we dealt with last week, it often comes from a genuine place. Okay? The idea was, the Bible can work for highly educated people. Right? We're post-enlightenment and age of reason, and people are saying science, reason, sociology. And Schleiermacher, from a genuine place, said those people with those emphases, with that worldview, can have the Bible too. But as we saw, what usually starts in a genuine place to reconcile Christianity with worldly wisdom ends up discarding everything orthodox as it goes along. We said that the progressive Christian has a high view of human intuition. We can figure it out. We've got a pretty good sense of right and wrong. And it subjects Scripture to human intuition. So a low view of Scripture and a high view of human intuition. We are more evolved. We are more enlightened. Culture has progressed. Humankind has progressed. We can read our more learned stuff back into that dated Bible thing. At its very worst, and you won't find many progressive Christians who say this, but there are some at the very end of the line who will say that even God has progressed. God wasn't so smart at the beginning, and he made a lot of mistakes, but he sort of corrected and figured some things out along the way. Now, I like kind of refreshing us that this usually comes from a genuine place. There is a vein of progressive Christianity in our own denomination. We've dealt with this, and I think some of these issues will come to the fore. And it's worth pointing out that it usually comes from a genuine place. We want our children who have gone to these universities and learned these other worldviews to have Jesus too. So how do we make the Bible fit in the worldview that they've accepted? That's genuine, right? It's wanting people to have Jesus. Unfortunately, what happens with what Kruger calls half-truths, progressive Christianity is an exercise in half-truths. You end up with a great lie when you follow the logic and the doctrine all the way to the end. Now, people will be on different parts of this spectrum, okay? There are some progressive Christians who will say, Jesus was not God, he was a good moral teacher. But not all progressive Christians will say that. Some will insist, no, he's God. Just what he taught about this, we can deal with liberally. It doesn't mean the same thing now, is it? Right? So there's a progression to progressive Christianity, if you will. We covered commandment number 1, which said Jesus we emphasize the fact that Jesus is a moral teacher. When you start talking about him dying and rising, and when you start talking about him being fully God and fully man, see, my enlightened mind says, come on, right? I don't really want to go there. But hey, his teachings are great, and we should WWJD, right? The kind of quote from that one that I gave you was, everything about the life and ministry of Jesus is summed up in a bracelet that says WWJD. We say, everything about the life and ministry of Jesus Christ is summed up in the cross and the grave. Right? That's where we see the ministry of Christ at its fullest, not on the inscription on a bracelet. Commandment 2 says we emphasize human ability and we de-emphasize sin. I'm fond of saying sin is a big freaking deal. If sin is a big freaking deal, so is the cross. As soon as you make sin not such a big deal, the cross doesn't accomplish too much either. Okay? It's a problem with emphasizing human intuition, human ability, human potential, in the words of Commandment 2. We have to recognize we have a sin problem, and Jesus has to be Lord and God to deal with our sin problem. We get to Commandment 3. I said I didn't want to teach too much today, so just a couple paragraphs of thoughts on each one, 3 and 4, and then I'll turn it over to your questions. Commandment 3 says, the work of reconciliation should be valued over making judgments. Kruger writes on page 17, one of the hallmarks of progressive Christianity is that it focuses less on the way humans relate to God and more on how humans relate to humans. Okay, let me draw this out with maybe a way too hot example. This is All Nation Heritage Sunday. We celebrate people from every tribe, nation, and language. We hate racism. Racism is a sin, and people who are racist should be told to stop being racist. It's terrible, right? And they need to be reconciled to God and to neighbor. The progressive Christian really, really hates racism and would say, if you are racist, then you're the worst kind of person in the world. You see, but what happens in saying we have to focus so much on how humans relate to one another, don't be racist. We need to relate to one another properly. But when you emphasize that, it has to come along with, and if you're racist, to hell with you, which is not human connection anymore. Kruger writes on page 19, the great irony for those who say we shouldn't judge is that they themselves are judging. They are declaring a behavior to be wrong. In this case, the behavior of judging, or in my case, my example, the behavior of being racist. While at the same time insisting that we shouldn't declare that behaviors are wrong. Judging is the ironic example. Don't judge. You can't tell people what to do while I tell you what to do. Right? It doesn't work. You can't prioritize human relationships while telling people they're doing it wrong, right? You have to reconcile with me, too, who's a racist in this example, okay? Right? You can't tell me I'm wrong if human relationships is the priority. In fact, we can and should declare behaviors wrong. But how do we do this? Do we do it based on human intuition? Or do we do it based on Scripture? How we declare behavior wrong or immoral should be reflective of God's revealed law and character. Our human intuition is not enough to judge human behavior. And then to Commandment 4, and I'll turn it over to you. Gracious behavior is more important than right belief. Kruger writes on page 21, what truly matters, we are told, is not what we believe, but how we believe. Be reminded, right behavior is determined for the progressive Christian, not by Scripture, but by human intuition. Our own understanding determines how we view right and wrong. We do make value judgments. We do make truth claims, claims to moral absolutes. But the progressive does it not with Scripture. It's human intuition informed by pop science and sociology. This is inevitably a problem. Why? Because pop science and sociology changes over time and cultures. Another way too hot example. Do the Nazis, pop culture and science and sociology, if the majority of Germany says, yes, we should kill people with mental disabilities, they are a drain on resources, and we should kill this one ethnicity because they represent what's wrong with the world. If the majority of that culture says that's moral behavior, does it make it moral? Of course not. See, human intuition is subject to way too many factors. If Scripture is our guide, it's not changing. God does not change. He is constant. He is faithful. We have moral absolutes, truth claims that are literally written in stone. Kruger concludes on page 22. Teaching people good theology is not the problem, but the solution. Teaching people good theology is a vital, essential way of caring for them. Rather than viewing theology as something that harms and oppresses people, we should be reminded that good theology actually comforts and liberates people. Questions on Commandments 3 or 4 or anything else?